Once upon a time, in 1483 England, a great king died. His name was Edward IV. He wasn't perfect, let's be honest, few kings were. But he had one important job left unfinished, handing over the crown to his son. Now that son was just 12 years old. His name, Edward II, Edward V. A young boy with royal blood, a fancy title, and absolutely no idea what kind of storm was about to hit him. Edward had a little brother too, 9 years old, cheerful, curious, and probably annoying in a younger brother kind of way. His name was Richard, Duke of York. Together, the two boys were next in line to rule the kingdom. All they had to do was wait and survive. Now here's where things start to feel like one of those creepy bedtime stories where everything seems fine until it isn't. Because with King Edward IV dead, the throne was up for grabs, and not everyone liked the idea of a 12-year-old calling the shots, especially not the boy's uncle, Richard, Duke of Gloucester. Yep, another Richard. England really needed more name options back then. Uncle Richard was smart, ambitious, and, let's just say, not the cuddly kind of uncle who brings you sweets and tells bedtime jokes. He was more like the, maybe I should be king instead kind of uncle. At first, everything looked normal. The young king-to-be, Edward V, was sent to London. The plan was to get him ready for his coronation, that big crown on the head moment. But instead of being taken to a palace, Edward and his brother were taken to the Tower of London. Now, back in those days, the Tower wasn't just a prison. It was also a royal home. So this wasn't weird, not at first, but the day started passing, and the coronation delayed again and again and again. Meanwhile, Uncle Richard kept gaining more power. He said he was just helping out, holding the crown for the kids. Real generous of him. And just like that, the peaceful tale of two royal boys turned into something darker, something twisted, something lost. This was only the beginning. So, the young princes were in the Tower of London. Not because they were in trouble. They hadn't broken any laws, except maybe being born at the wrong time, in the wrong family. Back then, the Tower wasn't just a place for locking people up. It also had fancy rooms, royal gardens, and a view of the Thames, kinda like a creepy castle Airbnb. Edward V, just 12 years old, was supposed to stay there for a few weeks, just until his coronation. His younger brother Richard joined him too. Because what's a tragic story without a little brother tagging along? At first, it seemed normal. The boys had servants, good food, and fresh clothes. But slowly, things changed. Their royal guards were replaced. The boys weren't seen as often on the tower balconies. And that big coronation day delayed. Again, suspicious, right? Meanwhile, their dear Uncle Richard was getting very comfortable with power. He held secret meetings. He talked about protecting the kingdom. He claimed the boys might not even be real princes, that their parents' marriage wasn't valid, so maybe Edward wasn't the rightful king after all. A convenient theory, if you ask me. And guess what? A few weeks later, Uncle Richard decided, hey, why not just cancel the coronation altogether? Because that's not shady at all. Instead of putting a crown on young Edward's head, Richard put it on his own. Yep, the uncle became King Richard III. Just like that, easy as stealing candy from a royal baby. As for the boys, they were still in the tower, still waiting, still hoping. But now, fewer people were allowed to see them. Their staff was reduced. Their rooms were guarded tightly. And then one day, They disappeared. No more sightings, no messages, no goodbyes, just silence. The people of London began to whisper, "Where are the princes? Why haven't they been seen? Did something happen?" But no answers came. And so, the Tower of London, once a royal home, became the center of a terrible mystery, a place where two young brothers were last seen and never seen again, while the princes sat quietly in the tower, or maybe not so quietly, who knows. Their dear Uncle Richard was making moves, big moves. He wasn't just keeping their royal seats warm. Oh no, he was flipping the chairs, moving the table, and redecorating the whole kingdom to fit his taste. Let's rewind a little. Richard, Duke of Gloucester, the boy's uncle, had convinced a few very important people that King Edward IV's marriage might have been illegal. Yep. He claimed the boy's parents were never truly married, which meant, wait for it, the princes were illegitimate. Now, back in those days, that was a big deal. If you weren't officially royal, you had no right to the throne. It didn't matter how cute your crown-sized head was. So, with a few clever speeches and a lot of nervous nobles nodding, Richard made it official. Young Edward V would not be king. Neither would his little brother. And who would take the throne instead? Surprise, surprise. Richard himself. He was crowned King Richard III on July 6th, 1483. It was a fancy ceremony, trumpets, velvet, all the royal jazz. But behind the scenes, people were whispering. The streets of London weren't cheering. They were worried, uneasy, suspicious. After all, two little boys had just been erased from the royal picture, and their uncle was now wearing the crown that should have been theirs. Kind of like showing up to your nephew's birthday party and keeping all the presents for yourself. But, you know, way more evil. Meanwhile, the princes were still missing. No parades, no portraits, no sign of life. Some people said they were sick. Others thought they were moved to another castle. But deep down, everyone feared the worst. Even Richard's own supporters started to squirm. They knew the story didn't add up. The timing, the silence, the sudden rise. But with Richard now king, nobody dared ask too many questions. At least, not out loud. So just like that, England had a new ruler, and two lost boys who had once been the hope of a kingdom were now just ghosts in a tower. So now we come to the part of the story where fact and rumor start dancing together in the dark. The princes, Edward and Richard, had vanished. No one had seen them. No one had heard from them. Not a letter, not a whisper, nothing. And people started to wonder, what really happened inside that tower? Whispers floated through the streets of London. Some said the boys had fallen ill. Others believed they were secretly taken to another castle. But most believed something far worse. The scariest rumor, that the princes had been murdered in the dead of night while they slept, soft pillows, quiet footsteps, and then silence forever. Creepy, right? And to make it even more chilling, no one could prove anything. Years passed, kings came and went, and the princes still missing. Then came James Tyrrell. Not a household name, but stay with me. He was a servant of King Richard III, and about 20 years later, under a different king, he confessed to killing the boys on Richard's orders. Sounds like a breakthrough, right? Well, maybe. Because historians argue about whether Tyrrell's confession was true or just forced out of him. You know, confessed with a sword to the ribs kind of thing. Fast forward to 1674, over 190 years after the princes vanished. Workers were renovating the tower and found a wooden box buried beneath a staircase. Inside were two small skeletons. Were they the princes? No one could say for sure. No names, no labels, no CSI back then. The bones were buried at Westminster Abbey with a royal tomb and a plaque that basically says, maybe these are the boys. We hope so. Even today, nobody really knows. Some believe King Richard III had them killed to protect his crown. Others blame Henry VII, the king who came after, who also had plenty of reasons to want the boys gone. And then there are the wild theories that the boys escaped, changed names, and lived quiet lives far away. Maybe one of them grew a beard and sold vegetables in France. Who knows? The truth, it's lost, somewhere between dusty scrolls and broken stone steps. And as night falls over the Tower of London, you can still imagine their footsteps echoing softly through the halls. Two young princes, two royal secrets, and a question that history still can't answer. Centuries have passed. Kings and queens have come and gone. Castles have turned into tourist spots. But the question still hangs in the air like an unsolved riddle. What really happened to the lost princes in the tower? We have clues, we have confessions, we even have some bones. But the truth, still hiding, somewhere between the bricks of history and the silence of a cold stone tower. Over the years, many theories have tried to solve the mystery. The most popular one? That King Richard III, the boys' uncle, ordered their deaths. Cold, calculated, and quiet. He had the motive. He had the power. And let's be honest, he already stole their throne. What's one more dark deed? But not everyone agrees. Some historians argue that Richard didn't need to kill them. Maybe he just hid them. Maybe he kept them locked away thinking it was for their own good. You know, like an extremely bad babysitting plan. Others blame Henry VII, the guy who overthrew Richard. Maybe he got rid of the princes to make sure no one could challenge his rule. That way, he could say, "Look, the boys are gone. I'm the only option now." Then there are the crazy theories that the princes escaped, that they lived under fake names, that they grew up in hiding and died of old age, totally forgotten. To be fair, that's a nice idea, but it's a bedtime story, not a history book. And speaking of bedtime, even modern science has tried to get involved. In recent years, people have asked for the bones found in 1674 to be tested using DNA. But it's a royal matter, and royal matters move slowly, like slower than medieval postal service. So to this day, the bones still rest in Westminster Abbey, in a small tomb that simply reads, "Here lie the remains of two princes, possibly Edward and Richard." It's not much, but maybe that's all we get. Because sometimes history doesn't hand us a clean ending. Sometimes it leaves us with half answers and haunted questions. Like a ghost story told too many times until no one remembers who started it. So tonight, as you drift off to sleep, just imagine two brothers, a stone tower, a crown, and a secret the world still hasn't unlocked. Good night, Your Highness. The past may be quiet now, but it never truly sleeps.